It is good that most people will never have their daily lives disrupted by a serious crime. However, the few who do often find themselves unfamiliar with the nuances of the legal system. That can frustrate and confuse victims. It can have the same effect on everyday citizens who are simply trying to understand the procedures in a high-profile case. Welcome. My name is Jeff Kidd, and I'm the Administrative Chief of Staff at the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office. We bring to you this video series to explain the criminal justice process in the 14th Circuit and to make the confusing clear. In this 10th episode, we explain what happens during a hearing in which the defendant pleads guilty. In most criminal courts, charges that have advanced beyond the grand jury and the first and second appearances are disposed of in one of two ways. The first is a jury trial, which will be explained in a subsequent video. The second is in a plea hearing. Across the nation and state, the vast majority of convictions, 95% or more, are finalized through guilty pleas. This is the case in South Carolina and in the 14th Circuit as well, though our office has a unique policy regarding pleas. To ensure that all cases are handled professionally and ethically, the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office adopted a no plea deals policy in May 2021. This ended the practice of making one sentencing recommendation if a defendant is convicted at trial and another, usually with lesser penalties, if the defendant pleads guilty. Instead, our prosecutors make sentencing recommendations with senior attorney input that take into account the severity of the offense and the offender's prior criminal history. The recommendation usually comes in the form of a range that leaves some discretion to the sentencing judge. However, the recommendation does not change unless new facts come to light. This policy has long been in place for years with our highly successful career criminal unit and now extends to all cases. It lets the defendant know early on our office's stance on sentencing. Because that stance does not change, it removes the incentive to prolong a plea decision until the eve of trial in hopes of a last-minute leniency from our office or from a judge. Importantly, this policy also eliminates any perception that we penalize defendants for exercising their constitutional right to a jury trial. There are two types of guilty pleas in South Carolina. In most proceedings, the prosecution will describe the charge and the facts of the crime. The judge will ask the defendant a series of questions designed to confirm that he or she has had access to legal advice and is entering the agreement freely. The prosecution will then make a sentencing recommendation, again, usually in the form of a range that leaves some discretion to the judge. If victims are present and wish to speak, they can do so. The defense can also make arguments regarding factors they believe should mitigate the severity of the sentence. The judge can then reject or accept the plea. If it is accepted, the judge will then set the sentence as they see fit. He or she does not have to follow the solicitor's recommendation. The second type of plea, a negotiated plea, entails a few key differences. The prosecution and defense agree to terms ahead of time. Procedure for this disposition hearing is much like that of other guilty pleas, except that the judge must either accept the plea and issue the negotiated sentence or reject the plea in its entirety. If the plea is rejected, the defendant can withdraw the guilty plea without surrendering the right to a jury trial. During these disposition proceedings, most defendants formally plead guilty. However, two other possibilities also are open to defendants. A defendant can plead no contest while refusing to admit guilt. Similarly, a defendant can enter an offered plea in which the defendant proclaims his or her innocence but concedes that the prosecution's evidence would likely result in a guilty verdict were the charge brought to trial. In both instances, the pleas have the same effect as pleading guilty and will still show as a guilty plea on the defendant's record. The pleas will also preclude any challenge of guilt in civil cases related to the crime. In terms of setting the docket, pleas involving defendants who are being detained, or jail pleas, typically are prioritized over walk-in pleas, that is, those involving defendants who are out on bond or free on their own recognizance. Dispositions during some terms of General Sessions Court might involve nothing but plea hearings. In other terms, hearings are scheduled around breaks in a jury trial or after its conclusion. In our next video, we will explain what happens during a jury trial.